I'm happy to see you and so many people actually here for the occasion of endorsing Swedish-Estonian cooperation report. The idea to have, first of all, I also have to introduce myself as a moderator. I'm Margus Kolga and now Director General of the Planning Department here. But I think the main reason why I was selected to be a moderator is because I was an Estonian ambassador to Sweden last 3 years. So relinquished my job about a month ago, and now here back in the House. But the idea to have that bilateral report targeting the cooperation between our two states and societies came about 2 years ago, and was actually based on the feeling that something had to be done to take a step forward in our relations, and also to have a more organized look to the future. Maybe it was also backed by the establishment of the Estonian-Swedish Cooperation Fund, which happened a year earlier. As Estonia have had already a tradition then of such kind of reports, and we have had them put together already with a number of our neighbors like Finland and Latvia, then it was rather obvious that we should try to use that method also with Sweden. And this idea originally came from Minister Reinsalu, who was then Minister of Foreign Affairs, and now he's sitting on the same position here with you today. And after some preliminary coordination, the new project was launched some days before Midsummer Night 2021, with the presence of Madam Minister Ann Linde, who is also here with us today, and then Estonian Minister Madam Eva-Maria Liimets. A rapporteur from both sides were tasked to investigate the landscape, coordinate ideas, and put a report together. And now the year have passed, and the report is ready and waiting for the endorsement. And that's actually the purpose why we are here today. Before we'll go to the agenda, I give you some idea what will happen. First, both ministers will give you some introductory remarks. After that, rapporteurs Per Nuder and Professor Raul Eamets will present the findings of the report. The problem is that Mr. Nuder is still on his... Per, you are here, sorry. Sorry, I couldn't see you. Happy to have you here, so we can have both of the rapporteurs today presenting you the report. And after that, those presentations will be followed with a panel with the attendance of both of the ministers and both of the rapporteurs. And of course, we will also take comments and questions from the audience. All of today's event is broadcasting over the web, so also and recorded for the history. So I hope that is clear, and we can start. And with that note, I would like to ask Minister Urmas Reinsalu to come forward and give his introductory remarks. Please, Urmas.
Thank you, Margus, dear Anne, dear Swedish friends, Estonian friends, dear Estonian-Swedish friends, Swedish-Estonian friends. So I'm truly proud. It's something marvelous. There is, how many days? 5 days before Swedish elections, and we got Ann Linde here. And this is something very remarkable. I don't know how many Swedish voters are there in Estonia. Does Mr. Jan Maniski still have dual citizenship, maybe, for whom to vote? But still, there is a momentum in the midst of these harsh times and the crisis running and wandering by the crisis. where there is also a momentum of optimism, and there's a momentum of optimism of our view and excitement of our unified future, the belief that we could actually intensify our cooperation. There has been a solid moment, what we, with passion and loyal love, look back of the 90s, where Sweden was so helping us in any ways. And now I think we need to get this excitement of our mutual cooperation in many new spheres back. And I'm truly grateful for distinguished rapporteurs, Mr. Eamets, Mr. Nuder. Both rapporteurs were personally selected by then respectively me and my Swedish colleague. I think there's a momentum of that the world is changing, and we in our region, either by regional cooperation, bilateral cooperation, could use a momentum, how to make it beneficially useful way, how to handle these 4 areas of cooperation which were dedicated as digitalization, energy, green transition, and also a sustainable forestry. These are indeed a practical sphere of issues. I very much look after the very practical implementation phase. The one thing is to write these reports, but I think also this report by itself gives a signal that we, in the Estonian side, we mutually would like to see a new level of ambition of our cooperation, that we should be nearer psychologically, economically, in all means, and in different spheres, as governmental cooperation, business cooperation, regional cooperation, academic cooperation. And in that sense, I think it is very important now to work out what will be as a center point of gravity, how to implement this excitement, this will. And this, I'm truly grateful that Swedish government created this cooperation fund to celebrate the centennial of our diplomatic relations. And I think this also in this report is an ideas how to enhance that fund, as you have Hanasaari project with Finland. And from Estonian side, let me express clearly that we do not want to see this paper just a paper. We would like to implement it. And and there's a vast set of issues, but one of the most exciting I read, I don't know, gave it from Swedish or Estonian side, idea of to have a land competition of small school children and televised also. So I think the sports will also unite our future generations. And by saying that, I'm truly grateful for rapporteurs, and saying that this comprehensive approach needs to be addressed, and we from Estonian side are most ready of the practical work. And by saying that, I look to our ambassadors, to our ministry team, to Swedish team, and I'm sure that we will not leave it, but we will have a level, as well also a proposal from on behalf of the Estonian government. We will be ready to have also a government level annual seminar, this idea. And if whoever leads Estonia next year, we are, at least today I can say we're ready to implement it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister, for those remarks. And I had the feeling that you have read the report already by yourself and know quite a lot of details in that, which is a good sign in itself. But now I would like to give the floor to the Swedish Minister for Foreign Affairs, Madam Ann Linde, who has been in that process for the whole time.
Well, thank you very much, Margus. Dear Urmas, Now we've spent 24 hours discussing intensively among our MB8 colleagues. And now we are going into the more bilateral issues. Excellencies, Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nuder, Mr. Imets, you told me from the chair here that maybe here are not so many Swedish voters, and we are just a few days, but here are actually around 1,000 Swedes living in Estonia, and I know that only 135 of them has voted at the embassy. So maybe I can get some more social democratic votes by just standing here, or what do you think?
I'm not against.
But Sweden and Estonia share a long history of close friendship, and we have deep cultural ties, deep personal ties. And since Estonia regained its independence in 1991, that was of an importance that was tremendous for us. And the Swedish society as a whole, in all different parts, I think are very proud that we took some part in it. But since then, the economic and political transformation of Estonia has been remarkable. And it's one of the success stories in Europe. We are now strong partners in the Nordic-Baltic cooperation and in the European family, and we are often like-minded. This is, of course, as it should be, but we should never take our friendship for granted. Compared to 30 years ago, our societies maybe know less about each other now. And this is unfortunately especially true of the younger generation. And I think that almost already at the plane when we talked, you were so excited about this children's competition. So I think that at least that is something we know already that we will implement. But of course, it doesn't need to be in this way. We should make all efforts to nurture the special bond that we have as neighbors with deep historical ties and closely aligned interest on issues of fundamental importance. But we need to rejuvenate our relationship, not least by creating more opportunities for integration between our youth. We live in uncertain time. Russia's war of aggression has profound implications for both our countries. This visionary report that is being presented today is indeed a very timely project. To write a comprehensive report about the complex relation between two countries are a daunting task, and I wish to commend both Mr. Per Nuder, a former cabinet minister in the government, and also Professor Rolf Imets for the excellent work that you have done. I share your conclusion that exchanges should increase in all areas of society, including between governments, parliaments, local authorities, business, academia, and people to people. You have identified 4 priority areas of special interest: the climate, energy policy, digitalization, and sustainable forestry. And these are certainly highly relevant, and your analysis offers much food for thought for further deliberation between our various stakeholders in Estonia and in Sweden. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Minister. And now it's time to go to the report itself. And for that, we have both of the rapporteurs here to do that. So I would like to invite them also to the podium to give you more detailed understanding what the report contains. To introduce the rapporteurs, first Per Nuder from the Swedish side, former politician, former Minister of Finances of Sweden, and now he's mostly engaged in the consultancy. And this report is also some way also kind of a consultancy. And Professor of Economics from Tartu University, Raul Ermets. both of the guys knew from where the money comes. Hopefully they know also where it goes. But please.
Now someone has to help with the technique here. Okay.
It's rather easy.
Okay, thank you.
And
Cool, thank you.
good.
Thank you. I have to say that it said Pärnuder, Sweden, but I have to make the confession. It's actually Sweden/Estonia. I have a dual citizenship. So to me, this is very, very personal. It's not consultancy. This is from the bottom of my heart. Actually, I have an apartment in Noblessner. And when I look towards the city, I can see the old prison Padarai, where my grandfather ended up in 1940 when he was caught by the Russians in southern Estonia, on his way to Lubyanka in Moscow, on his way to Siberia, where he was killed in 1942. So I share a lot of Estonian-Swedish history with many of you. When Raul and I got this task from our two governments, we, exactly as the minister said, we concluded in advance that the report is one thing. It's everything before the report, and especially after the report. So our first thanks is to many of you who have participated, because we have interviewed a lot of people. We haven't just taken things from the air. We have interviewed, we have seminars, we have had roundtables in order to get this report. But now it's even more important, and that's the implementation period. It's a never-ending story. So we have decided to divide our presentation. So first I go through the background, where we think we are in our two relations, and then Raul will present our concrete proposals. So this is the time horizon for the report 2035. It might look very far ahead of us, but it's not that far to 2035. We have tried to be not that super visionary in the sense that this is something unreachable. On the contrary, we try to be very concrete in our proposals, which you hopefully will see later on. This is the structure of the report, and Raul will go through the second part, and I the first one. We concluded one thing quite early, that if you don't know where you come from, it's very difficult to know where you're going. So we need to look a bit backwards in order to be able to find out how things are today, and especially where we are going. But we also said to ourselves, this is not a report that should be backward looking. So this is actually the first concrete proposal that we have, and that is to the academic society, that this is a very interesting research field. How has Sweden's and Estonia's cooperation developed since Estonia's liberation independence in 1991? We have just made a quick and dirty historic analysis and divided it into 4 phases. Before the Singing Revolution, cooperation was almost zero. However, there was a dream on this side of the Baltic Sea, and there was a dream on the other side of the Baltic Sea, that one day families will be united again. I remember when I was a kid in the late 60s, and my father took us to Helsinki, and we went up to the tower near the Olympic Stadium, and he pointed out over the sea, that's where I come from. That was quite weird for a kid in the age of 6, 7 years old to recognize that. Then we had the very vibrant period in our cooperation, when Estonia slowly was gaining independence, started with the Singing Revolution, and finally got its independence in 1991. And many years came with a very flourishing cooperation based on a true solidarity from the Swedish side. The so-called Monday movement, Måndagsrörelsen in Sweden, played a very important role to waken up the Swedes for the sake of not only Estonia, but for all 3 Baltic states. Then we had a period when Estonia slowly started to become a mature, democratic society, formed its own destiny. And then after Estonia's EU accession in 2004, we were 2 full-fledged neighbor countries, 2 democratic small countries in the northern periphery. However, we might have forgotten something when we both joined the European Union, Sweden in 1995 and Estonia in 2004. When I was a minister, I never visited Tallinn for a bilateral meeting because we met in Brussels. So in that sense, paradoxically, the bilateral ties were a little bit weaker due to our joint EU memberships. So it's about time to reflect and think how we can strengthen them again. So we are not living on an own planet, on a Baltic planet. We are living on a joint common planet where we have some global megatrends that for sure affect us as well as everybody else on this planet that we share together. And we highlight them as a baseline for cooperation. What we didn't know when we got this mission from the ministries is that Russia would invade Ukraine the 24th of February. We were not aware that Sweden and Finland, 2 neighboring countries to Estonia, would apply for membership in NATO. The whole pattern, the whole map has dramatically changed during our work. So Raul and I, we had to ask ourselves, how much should this influence our report? And we came to the conclusion that this is a fundamental change. However, in people's daily life, we have to stick to very concrete measures. But as both ministers underlined, this is a situation where we have a momentum where we can strengthen our cooperation. So where are we then in our joint relations? We have done a typical SWOT analysis, which mostly is done in corporate circumstances. We have tried to identify the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats to our cooperation, to our relation. And I have underscored 2 bullet points here. We do have more than ever common geopolitical interests. Geopolitics has dramatically changed, and we will see much more of cooperation, not only related to traditional defense, foreign policy, security, because the borders between civil and defense is very vague nowadays. There are a lot of, if one can be very blunt, there are a lot of opportunities, not only in Estonia early, might have had a very important role for what you are today, namely the most digitalized country on earth. However, there are obvious weaknesses in the situation of today. As Minister Linde pointed out, there is unfortunately, a diminishing knowledge about our countries. Too few Estonians go to Sweden, in particular young Estonians, and vice versa. Too few Swedes go to here. And there are still today, there are many stereotypes in Sweden that Estonia is still some kind of ex-communist country. And you have to come here and see with your own eyes what modern Estonia is. And so we really need jointly to learn more about each other, in particular targeting the young generation. And this ends up in some kind of attitude that we have taken as a little bit for granted. And in all relations, I mean, we are in relations. You have to work with your relation. You can't just take your partner for granted. It's something, it's a daily work to really improve your relation. And it has to be an end of that attitude. What are the threats? Well, these are some of the threats that we have identified. And I have made in red one bullet point there, and that is that we have too few common institutions. Cooperation is too often built on ad hoc projects that should be financed from here and to then. We need to create institutions, and we have some concrete proposals on this. What are the opportunities? There is a pool of opportunities here. I mean, as rightly already has been said, there is a momentum right now, and I can feel that during this year when Raul and I have been working with the report, that there is a growing interest in strengthening our relations. I'm chairman of the Sweden-Estonia Cooperation Fund. We have recently launched what we call a Young Leaders Program, where we have picked 2 young leaders below 35 from politics, business, academia, NGOs, culture, in order to create a network of young tomorrow's leader that will know more about Sweden, respectively Estonia. And we are very happy to say that this program is sponsored by the 2 Swedish banks, Swedbank and SEB. And we think that is an important sign in itself, because there is only, I would say, one controversial part of our report. And that is that the money laundering scandal that hit Estonia a couple of years ago, that was really bad for our relations. There was a blame game. Who is responsible? Is it the Estonians or is it the Swedes? Who were responsible for this? And this had a dramatic negative impact on Estonia's international brand. And we pinpoint, therefore, the Swedish banks that they have a certain responsibility in order to strengthen the ties once again. And therefore, we are very happy that they are sponsoring this program. The final bullet point there is very exciting, I think. In Sweden, we have many old companies, many world known all over the world. I don't think there is any country that has so many worldwide known brands like Sweden. There is Volvo, Ericsson, nowadays Spotify, IKEA, H&M. There is a variety of them. Estonia is now coming up on the road in this sense as well. There is a local domestic Estonian capital created from the many unicorns. And this will, in some time, lead to a more balanced trade and investment relation between our 2 countries. Not only Swedish money that will be invested in Estonia, but also vice versa. And therefore, we need to tell the young entrepreneurs much more in Estonia about the opportunities in Sweden, and vice versa, to learn the startup community in Sweden, that here is a very flourishing startup community. So this is where we think we are today. And Raul, now you will tell the audience where we should go.
Honorable Ministers, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. So my part is to present quite specific and concrete policy proposals. And first I must say that these are really ideas we got from people whom we have interviews, whom we have seminars. We have very few our own ideas. This is really fruit of the collective thinking, collective brain, if to say so. So there was more than 100 people who were involved in this process. And that was a very great process. I learned a lot from these different meetings, seminars, interviews, so on. So we stressed 4 policy areas, as it was already mentioned here before: climate change, digitalization, energy policy, and forestry. And I will present just a few examples from our report. Altogether, I looked them, there was around 50 different proposals, so you can see only a fraction of them. If we talk about climate change, we see closer cooperation in a number of areas in academia, joint research projects analyzing how offshore wind parks affect the Baltic Sea environment. So microplastics affect the ecosystem is not investigated so far. In digitalization, both sides, Sweden, perhaps more from private side, Estonia in the public sector, have both been successful in digitalization. We can learn much more from each other in cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, blockchain, digital health, and some other areas. One more thing I forgot to say in the very beginning is we try to follow one strict principle if we collected these different policy proposals, that of course there are a lot of things Estonia can learn from Sweden, because Sweden is bigger, Sweden is older, Sweden has a bigger economy, richer society, and so on. We try to put to this report only those proposals which are mutually beneficial, that both sides can learn something, that obviously we have something to offer to Sweden, and Sweden obviously have something to offer to us. Energy policy, the challenge of climate change is closely linked to a new, more sustainable energy policy. And we firmly believe that Estonia and Sweden could take a leading role in bilateral cooperation, like smart grids, new energy storage solution, offshore wind parks, hydrogen transmission networks. Why we have one windmill park in the middle of Baltic Sea, connected only to Latvia or connected only to Estonia or only to Sweden? It would be much wiser to have a network of transmission that different countries, not only Sweden and Estonia, all connected to the same wind park, and we can share the energy because the consumption is different in different times. Forestry. In forestry, we all know there are several contradictory objectives: carbon binding, a forest as an energy source, but also biodiversity, the growth of forest industry. Both countries struggle with those issues, and we should work together, finding better solution for balancing on one side economic and on the other side environmental interests. We divided our proposals into different categories. I would say it's a level how to implement them, and I start from people to people, or let's say from a grassroots level proposals. And as it already was mentioned, our vision is to establish a center of Swedish-Estonian cooperation, like there is institution Hanaholmen outside Helsinki that promotes cooperation between Finland and Sweden. It could be the place where different workshops are organized, seminars, cultural events, and we urge the Swedish-Estonian Cooperation Fund will take the lead in this. And we encourage a campaign in various media channels to improve Estonians' image in Sweden and Swedish image in Estonia through positive examples. because we all know that the knowledge about each other, people, each other culture is, and everyday life is rather limited. But also, but I will come to this creative industry later on. So if we look cooperation from government to government, then we urge the governments to establish a yearly forum for policy and the best practice exchange on a ministerial level. As Per already mentioned, he basically never came to Estonia to meet his colleague. They meet in Brussels, but why not to meet in Estonia? And we urge members of Riigikogu and Riksdagen and members of the European Parliament to establish a closer cooperation with mutual working groups as well. From municipality to municipality, region to region, there are a lot of potential. We had many friendship relations in early 90s, and today most of these relations between local municipalities, cities, they have disappeared. And we have to really try to push these activities again with twin cities, twin region, like our big islands, and Gotland, for instance, is one example. We have a lot of common interest, smart city, local public transportation, all actions related to the climate changes, digital solutions, and so on. And we also strongly recommend more frequent exchange of ideas and experience between primary and secondary school students in our two countries. And also, language is very important. Swedish is studied in Estonia and Estonian in Sweden, and we urge governments to jointly investigate on how to increase the interest for language studies in our two neighboring countries. Has been in Estonia, we see the growing discussion that why the second language in many schools is Russian. Perhaps it's a good time at the moment to replace this language with the Scandinavian languages, why not to Sweden and Finland instead of Russia. From business to business, Estonia and Sweden are both successful startup nations, and we strongly recommend the Venture Capital Association of the two countries to strengthen their cooperation. Would like to see better Estonian-Swedish presence on many startup events. Just a couple of weeks, or actually last week, there was in Tartu Startup Day, where we have 3,000 students from Estonia presenting their ideas. Why not to bring other 3,000 from Sweden and have a joint activity? Why, if not in Tartu, then in Tallinn, it doesn't matter, but to have a kind of common activities. Strengthening the creative industry, we know Sweden has a famous and leading role in pop music and modern film industry. Estonia has some world names in the classical music, as well as in the traditional folk music. We should use these differences to grow stronger together. And it's not only the music, it could be same goes to handwork, wooden architecture, and other things. Enterprise Estonia is present in Sweden, but Business Sweden is not represented in Estonia, and we urge Business Sweden to re-establish its presence in Estonia as well. From university to university, my field, of course, our proposals are about more student exchange and mobility between Estonia and Sweden, higher education. We propose scholarship for students, joint research topics, joint PhD schools. A big issue in our universities is how to balance international university with a national university, or let's say how Tartu University is international university and Estonian university. I think the similar challenges are in all the Swedish universities. Why not to put our efforts together and to find out how to balance this internationalization and domestic cultural needs. So Alfred Ots Scholarship at Chalmers in Göteborg has been an important support to Estonian doctoral students who would like to see a similar scholarship for Sweden and the TalTech at Tallinn University. And last but not least, as it was said many times here today, we would like to see results. And we really hope that this report will not stay in some shelves in the Ministries of Foreign Affairs, but we will see some activities. We propose two things. We suggest our governments to organize a series of conferences in 4 policy areas. We prioritized our report. These series of conferences will bring together academics, leading business people, political leaders, NGOs from both countries, and we could have in a roundtable format discussing these forestry issues, climate issues, and so on. Secondly, we should not forget regional cooperation. We know that early this year, Estonian Finnish cooperation, future cooperation report was launched. This Friday, as much as I know, Estonian-Latvian report will be made public. So why not to have a joint conference where all 3 reports and joint activities, Estonia, Latvia, Sweden, and Finland, will present some results of their reports which have mutual interest or regional interest to other countries as well, to see more cooperation between Estonia, Sweden, Finland, and Latvia. And very last thing, which is not in this slide, we would like to see some kind of assessment of this report after 5 years, where we are, and to get the promises from our ministers that they will do that, that we will see how far we are, because we think 5 years is enough to see some positive results of changing cooperation. But this is shortly from my side, and thank you for attention.
Thank you for both the rapporteurs for the detailed introduction of the report. And now I would like to ask ministers to come forward, and also rapporteurs to come forward to sit on the podium, and we can then engage in the discussion and question and answer period. Please. Good. We have about, because of the program constraints, we have about 15 or 20 minutes for the discussion and for the questions and answers. And I would do some questions from my side, and then, of course, you could also, the audience can reflect on the findings. I would like to start with Minister Linde, and Per reflected that there is a kind of a certain momentum now going on with deepening of our cooperation, and the report points out a number of needs of achieving the visible results. And my question to you is that, do you have kind of the special suggestions what we should do in order to strengthen our relations in short term, and which can sort of have a kind of the more visible outcome of that?
Well, thank you. I think that writing the report, and not least the way that the authors decided to do it, with all those seminars and meetings and interview, that has been something that has strengthening the bilateral relation already. And there are very promising proposals in the report. We have seen some of them, but there are much more in the report. And what I think now is that we need to see to how these proposals fit into the work. There are different stakeholders that are proposed to do different things. And that we can kind of give a go-ahead for that work. And I hope that either if I continue or if there is another foreign minister, there will be the same priority to continue this work for the years to come.
Would you like to reflect also on that, Urmas?
There is in Haapsalu a Swedish museum, and there is a long pier now where there are many boats what the Swedes used for fishery, for transport from the historical perspective, and actually it needs also a new building. It should be Estonian government responsibility to have a new building to that. For Swedish side, if we are going to have a NATO division, and when Sweden is a full member of NATO, we would have also a one slot to be covered by Sweden, to have a Swedish unit also back in Estonian territory.
Very good. Already very concrete recommendations. I remind that everything is recorded, so very good. But now another question to the ministers. The recommendations of the report, they contain 4 policy areas. So climate, digitalization, forestry, and energy. But most of those, actually all of those, are kind of out of the foreign policy scope. Although there is a touch on that, but they are the questions which are handled in both of our countries by other governmental agencies and by other ministers. And my question is how to get those sectors also to take the lead of the part of that process, because if they are not involved, then it's very difficult to do only for the foreign policy means. Do you have any idea how to do that?
Well, actually, we have experience of this kind of bilateral work. And in Germany, for example, I and the foreign minister of Germany at that time, we started a process like this. In Germany, they call it Ländertisch. It's a strange word, but it means that a little bit like Swedish smörgåsbord, which means that you should see in all different areas where we could cooperate. So we started to make an invention of all the different ministries. What could we cooperate on, Sweden and Germany? And it was fantastic because it created such an energy and there was so many proposals, and we have started in areas that is of course not from the foreign ministry. And I think here we don't have a Ländertisch or a smörgåsbord, but we have 4 distinct priority areas proposed by the rapporteurs. And I think the first thing is, of course, to see to that the relevant ministries and authorities do the same thing as we did with Germany, even if that was broader, to see how can we continue with this, because the experience we had was exciting, and I'm sure that this will be as exciting.
Thank you, Minister. There is also a recommendation in the report that both of the governments should have regular or annual or every second year some kind of the joint seminars in order to get people or the ministers to have a personal touch, but also to have a possibility to discuss the issues between each other. But Urmas, what are your ideas on that?
Our top foreign intelligence official now will become Estonian Forest Management Director. It's news in Estonian media. And I think there's in Estonia, you know, I don't know how is it about Sweden, is long debate about, and there's like 2 parties, basically all the society is divided. The one party says we are destroying our forests, we are not keeping it for our generations, and another says, okay, but this is a way of life, which usually has to be, we need to see economic perspective of forestry. And I think to put a Swedish kingdom as a judge, whose part is right, what is a balanced way of sustainable forestry, I think for this new Estonian forest management director would be best idea to do. So this would be very practical outcome indeed of sustainable forestry. We are very bad need of a good judge to decide what would be reasonable.
Just say we have election on Sunday, and forestry is one of the main decisive and divisive issues. So I prefer to say nothing about this.
No, we could then say how is it right in Sweden, and you are doing how it's right in Estonia.
You will get answers like this.
Good, but now I would like to turn to the rapporteurs, and I would like to say that the report is, I think it's more than actually it was expected from at the beginning, and there is quite a lot of recommendations and ideas what can be used for the future. And now, as you worked a year together, so I would like to ask, what were the main challenges in that work, and what seemed to be positive and easy, but where the problems, or the work was not a problem at all?
Well, I can just echo what Raul said about that we have really been eager to come up with a concrete suggestion of mutual character. That has been a challenge from time to time, because there has been a little bit too much of we should learn from them, and not that it should be mutual. But we have forced ourselves really to come forward with these mutual. And just coming back to your previous question, Margus, I think that it's super important that the two ministries of foreign affairs, that you are responsible for spreading the report to relevant stakeholders, not only within the government structure, but also to NGOs, to business organizations, to the cultural society, to academia, to all these we are addressing. Otherwise, this will be a government product, and that is not what we have foreseen in our suggestions.
So.
I think the writing of report was fun, and perhaps the challenge was to filter out the more important or mutually beneficial policy recommendations, because the whole set of suggestions was much bigger or wider what we actually included finally to report. And I think the challenges are in the future, not in the writing report, because I think the first step we have to do is to translate this to the domestic languages and give a broader audience access to the local people to this report, and to make it more public via media and so on, to not to leave this message only in this room or only this hour today, but to see really some steps that are next.
I think, yes, the transparency and the openness of the report is important to get people to know what is recommended, and also the implementation will be much more easier, although I do not know what the policy with the policy of the House is still, but I'm sure that it will be publicized and open to everybody. But now I see already the question from the audience. Kaya, please, but come to the microphone, because we are recording it.
Thank you so much. My name is Kaya Tallinn. I'm the Special Envoy for Climate and Energy Policy in the Foreign Ministry, already in intense cooperation with my Swedish counterpart, Mattias Flumeri. So modern foreign ministries nowadays do deal a little bit with climate and energy. And the report, of course, thank you very much, was music to my ears. Climate, energy, digital. But I also noticed that among the weaknesses, you said that we don't know each other's culture. So my 2 cents at the moment would be, for the benefit of my Swedish friends, to quote a classic book in Estonian everybody here knows this. It's Kevade. And there is a beloved teacher who tells his student, well, if you can't do all of the math homework, then do at least half. And I would take this approach at the moment. If we can't begin with a series of conferences, let's do one seminar. And I will suggest a focus here, which my minister was after. When you take those three first topics, climate, energy, and digital, they are actually interlinked, very much so. And you can even take forestry. I mean, a lot of forestry nowadays is digitalized. But as for the first three, it's known in the European Union as twin transition. So using digital means for the purposes of climate goals. We are already talking about this with Sweden and Germany in the European Union, but I think it would be a very nice focus topic also for the foreign ministers to promote. So this is my 2 cents for the ministers. Thank you.
Yeah, there is.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the report. I'm Yoko Alender. I'm the chair of the Swedish parliamentary group in the Estonian Riigikogu and also the co-chair of the Estonia-Sweden Cooperation Fund. And definitely agree with the issues, with the 4 policy areas on climate. I think we need to start also working together on adaptation, because that's where we actually are and we need to be looking forward. But to get to know the culture, I also have good news. Estonia has decided to open a cultural ambassador post in Sweden. The post is being filled in the end of this month, so I think I'm also looking forward to a good cooperation with this post, and I'm also thinking that maybe we should think about the Swedish counterpart. Thank you, and very big thank you to the reporters and the ministers. Thank you.
Thank you, Yoko. There is.
Yes, I'm Daniel Säveborg, professor of Scandinavian Studies at the University of Tartu. I'm from Sweden originally, but I've lived here for 12 years now in Estonia. And at first I would like to say that I really appreciated what Per Nuder said about the importance that we should have a sort of, the cooperation should be a win-win, a sort of mutual thing and not about aid. But I also think this comes close to what I think there's a little bit of a problem which is not completely admitted by the rapporteurs here, namely that there is a very, how to say, asymmetrical interest in the cooperation between Estonia and Sweden, and I think we need to admit that. I can see from my own work that there is an enormous interest in Estonia learning Swedish language. I mean, we have higher application rates to Swedish than we have to German, French, and Spanish, and Russian at the University of Tartu. And people study Swedish everywhere, at the gymnasiums, at the Folkuniversitetet, Rachvölikol, and so on. And Estonian children, they grew up with Astrid Lindgren and Lasse-Majas Detektivbyrå. All Estonians go to Sweden. I mean, Sweden is an enormously important trade partner for Estonia. But the opposite is not really the truth. I mean, Swedish children don't grow up with Sipsik, and they don't study Estonian in all the gymnasiums, etc. And Swedes normally don't go to Estonia. And although, of course, we have a lot of trade cooperation, Estonia is not so extremely important for Sweden regarding trade cooperation. And I think we have to admit this fact, that we have this sort of asymmetrical interest. And this means also that there is a very much bigger responsibility for Ann Linde, for Sweden, if you want to really have a cooperation, because the problem is rather Sweden, that there's not this interest of cooperation in Sweden, not this real interest. Of course, we have always talked about the importance of cooperation. But from the Estonian side, we can always see in practice this interest of cooperation, the interest in Sweden. But we need to admit the fact that there is not really the same interest in Sweden. Thank you.
Thank you. The asymmetry question was targeted already prior. We went to the report, so that was also one question. What do we realize by ourselves? And this is in a way true. But on the other hand, all of us have brought up with Peppi Longstocking and Bullebury children and Kalle Blomqvist. So there is some commonality also in that. But would you like ministers to comment on that asymmetry thing?
I think maybe the rapporteurs are better to comment on that, because if you're a foreign minister, that is nothing that you acknowledge. I mean, because I and Ormas, for example, or others, we are totally symmetrical. No, but I mean, for real. I mean, when we work in all the council meeting in the EU, when we work at the MBA meeting, and so there is no difference in how we view proposal from each other, or how we view. So on the ministerial level, I would say there is not such an asymmetry. So it would be more interesting to hear the rapporteurs on this.
Yeah, obviously we mentioned these things in our SWOT analysis. If you look at the weakness side, we talk about Big Brother problem and other things. Perhaps we didn't comment so much here, but if I think about the one purpose of this report, it was said here how to increase the cooperation, but there, at least Estonians are used to read between the lines. That between the lines was written to decrease asymmetry of mutual interests.
Well, my view on this is, I'm nowadays I was in politics for 30 years now, and now I've been in the private sector the last 15 or so. And I mean, there is obvious Sweden is economically very present in Estonia, the banks, the manufacturing industries, and so on, a lot of investors. However, when I started to reconnect with my Estonian roots 6-7 years ago, I attended Latitude, the startup conference here in Tallinn, and I was so surprised how many they were, how good they were, and what are the Swedes. There were no Swedish startups or Swedish capital or venture capital funds. We are bloody rich in Sweden. We have enormous capital resources, but very few of that capital is actually allocated here. So I started, and I'm wearing an order of recognition here that I got from President Kaljulaid a couple of years ago, because what I've been doing since then is trying to connect the startup nations. And it has been really tough, because the Swedes, the young Swedish entrepreneurs, they have no knowledge about what you are doing over here. And I think that you do have a very equal relation on a political level, but economically there is a lot to do, I think, from the Swedish side. So and I also think that I'm not here to bash the banks. I'm here to thank the banks that they are supporting the fund and the Young Leadership Program. But I do think that they have been bad ambassadors in Sweden for investment opportunities in Estonia. So, because they are the ones who really knows what one can get if you invest in Estonia. So I think that there is a lot to do still.
Yeah, sure.
But Professor is of course right. Children's literature is very important. I do one of my favorite books was Selma Lagerlöf, Nils Holgersson Travels. And I still remember all the protagonists, all the adventures. Duck Martin, Nils, Smirre, Fox. And I just 2 weeks ago with my child, I read one Estonian journalist has written a children's book, Moon as a golden ship. And this is actually based on memoirs of these small children who left in 44 Estonia and as a boat refugees with families came to Gotland, and how kind were the Lotas in Gotland, and how the Swedish people received them, and how many people sacrificed their lives and so on. And actually this would be my one proposal, maybe to look after, to translate it into Estonia if it hasn't done yet. And I think this is indeed important, and I think this was also the core as these emotions what children got, and also this competition you had idea.
Thank you. I'm happy that literature and books still matter. So it's a very important message. But I can't abuse the time anymore. Only one last question, and I expect very short answer of all of you. So what next? What else?
This children's sport competition. Everybody understands it. There will be intrigue. What kind? I asked also rapporteurs what kind of fields of sport, either athletics, or of course it has to differ from the generation groups, but also to look to take into the board Estonian and Swedish public broadcasting companies under their patronage to do it. I think it is something interesting, that maybe it could rise also something broader as a young children's competition of the Baltic Nordic countries. I think the physical movement of children is a very practical problem, and of this fair competition would encourage also the life quality of future generations. And maybe this is one practical idea. At least it raises a debate in society. It's very important now to fuel the concept of report from very different angles, as you very rightly stated, that it needs to actually to be echo in the society. If it doesn't happen, there is something wrong indeed. And I very much look all these people, audience who are friends of Sweden, of Estonia, of mutual cooperation. Now it's momentum to be vocal.
Well, together with Joko and Jan, who are also in the Sweden-Estonian Funds board, I'm really excited to take care of the whole report, but in particular to try to create this Hanna Holmen here in Tallinn. That's my mission in life.
And I support her in this idea. That was my first priority as well.
So you will continue working, as I see. Please.
The first thing I would do is to ask two very competent and excellent women sitting here, Mrs. Ambassador and Mrs. Responsible for Estonia in the Foreign Ministry, to take this report and see how we take the next step, because that is the best thing you can do as a minister, is to say, I think this is very good, now please implement.
Thank you. Now I have to draw the line. I would like to thank ministers for coming over. I would like to thank rapporteurs for putting together excellent work. Now, as Minister Linda said, it's time for the implementation. Of course, the menu is very long, so we still have to select, and the selection have to be done first. But implementation. That's important, and hopefully in 5 years we'll come together here in this hall and have a review. What has happened in Haapsalu, in that house? Good, thank you.
Thank you.